Guego. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out this morning to our talk with Dr. Leroy Little Bear. It's an honor to have Leroy here with us this morning, and we're going to get started. I know that participants number is still climbing, so thank you, everyone who's still tuning in. So I just wanted to start by introducing myself. So Sego Guego, Liv Yungyats, Rondo de Waxanazare, Wakata Uni, Ganige Haga, ni Wakwanjona, Deo de no Sakto, ni Diwaguego, De Wasam Wisk, na Devago Seriago, Ganige Ha Tanon Education Katawiansta, Gary Hunyani. So, hi, my name is Liv Rondo. I belong to the Mohawk Nation. I'm Wolf Clan. I grew up in the Niagara region, but my Indigenous roots are in Ganawage Mohawk territory. I am currently the coordinator for the Indigenous Teacher Education Program here at Queen's University. I'm studying education, so I'm also a Master of Education student, and I'm learning my heritage language, which is Ganigeha. And so thank you so much for being with us here today. I just want to begin with the land acknowledgement, and I want to say to acknowledge this traditional territory is to recognize its longer history, one predating the establishment of the earliest European colonies. It is also to acknowledge this territory's significance for the Indigenous people who lived and continue to live upon it and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants. It's my understanding that this territory is included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The Kingston Indigenous community continues to reflect the area's Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee roots. There's also a significant Métis community as well as First Peoples from other nations across Turtle Island who are present here today. I also acknowledge that we have guests who are present here today from across Turtle Island, and we invite you to reflect on the traditional territories in which you are situated on, along with what gifts these lands bring you every day. Following this event, I will be going out to offer tobacco to the land, as I believe just beyond acknowledging the territory, we must also acknowledge the land and be thankful for all that it provides and all of our relations provide for us. So I've been asked to open today with an Ohonte Gai Wadekwa, or the words before all else. As I said, I am a Ganigeha language learner, but I decided I'm going to be brave today and try to give the words before all else in Ganigeha. So we do the words before all else to open up any ceremonies or things that we have in our communities as a way to bring our minds together as one, and also to offer thanks and gratitude to all of our relations and all of creation. So I'm going to start that now. Aguego Anska, Chianti Wenuni, ne Onkwa Nigunra Tanon, Deitinu Harados, ne Onkwe Sua. Dogari na Yundin, ne Onkwa Nigunra. Aguego Anska, Chianti Wenuni, ne Onkwa Nigunra Tanon, Deitinu Harados, ne Yatni Staha, Jiwo Wanjade. Dogari na Yundo, ne Onkwa Nigunra. Aguego Anska, Chianti Wenuni, ne Onkwa Nigunra Tanon, Deitinu Harados, ne Gane Garimyo. Dogari na yundo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon dantinu harados ne ganjo sua. Dogari na yundo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon dantinu harados ne odera sua. Dogari na yundo ne onkwa nigunra. Deantinu harados, aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon dantinu harados ne Ohonte Sua. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon deantinu harados ne Ohonte Sua. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon deantinu harados ne Oji nuwasua. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon deantinu harados ne Gahiksua. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon deantinu harados ne onukwasua. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Aguego anska chianti wenuni ne onkwa nigunra tanon deantinu harados ne Johekwa. Dogari na yondo ne onkwa nigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Deantinu Herados ne Gundirio. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Deantinu Herados ne Gurunde Sua Denon Ogwasua. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Deantinu Herados ne Oji da Ogunya. Dogari ne yundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Wenuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Deantinu Herados ne Gayeri Nikawerege. Dogari na yundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Wenuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Deantinu Herados ne Yonki Stukua Ratiweras. Dogari na yundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon JT Wanu Herados ne Echi Dewaji Ajokaneka Garakwa. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Yeti Sota Asota Garakwa. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Menuni ne Onkonigunra Tanon Yoji Stukwa Runyo. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Agwego Anska Chianti Wenuni ne Onkonigunra. Dechi Manu Herados ne Sungwadiso. Dogari Nayundo ne Onkonigunra. Do Nikawanage Dono Ona Eto. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as I said, I am a language learner, but I appreciate you offering the opportunity for me to be able to practice that in my language and to share the opening with you. So the Indigenous Teacher Education Program is really proud to be a sponsor of this event. Our program provides an opportunity for our teacher candidates to specialize in Indigenous education, and it qualifies graduates for the Ontario College of Teachers certification. We're honored to be in conversation and circle with Leroy Littlebear today. His dedication to and advocacy for Indigenous education, rights, self-governance, language, and culture is inspiring. Leroy is also recognized as one of the continent's leaders in the advancement and acceptance of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. I think everyone's going to benefit from his wisdom, knowledge, and excellence regarding how to bring Indigenous knowledge into mainstream institutions such as schools. Nyawagoa, thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm going to pass it over to Alice.
Niall and Liv, thanks so much for helping us to start off today in a good way. And greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Leroy Littlebear's recorded talk entitled Rethinking Our Science, Blackfoot Metaphysics Waiting in the Wings, Reflections by a Blackfoot. A large number of people have registered for today's event, illuminating the relevance and importance of Leroy's scholarship to a cross-section of Canadians. My name is Alice Johnston, and I am a settler Canadian currently completing a PhD through the Faculty of Education at Queen's University. I am also the Queen's University Biological Station's Indigenous Knowledge STEM Program Coordinator and facilitator for the NSERC Promo Science project that precipitated Littlebear's visit today. I will be your moderator for today's webinar and will facilitate the flow of questions following Leroy's talk. We ask that you please use the public Q&A box where we will do our best to review, respond, and direct your questions. There is live captioning enabled for today's session. So please click the closed caption icon in the meeting bar in the lower left-hand corner of your screen to access that. Instructions for accessing closed captioning are also available in the chat box. Today's session has been generously sponsored by many organizations, including the Indigenous Teacher Education Program at Queen's University, the Queen's University Biological Station, in addition to our Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada's Promo Science Grant. We also thank the Queen's Smith School of Business Video Conferencing Services for providing tech support for this webinar. I would now like to introduce Dr. Stephen Lougheed, Professor and Bailey Family Chair in Conservation Biology and Director of the Queen's University Biological Station. Stephen will introduce the Promo Science project that resulted in this event and introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Leroy Littlebear. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And welcome to everyone. It is really our immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Leroy Littlebear to Queen's University, at least virtually. We'd obviously prefer to have had him come in person. I will keep this brief, as you all tuned in to listen to Dr. Littlebear, and clearly not to me. As Alice indicated, the opportunity to host this seminar arose because of an initiative supported by the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada's Promo Science program. For those of you not aware, Promo Science supports programs that promote deeper understanding of science, engineering, mathematics, and technology for young Canadians, especially focused on providing hands-on learning experiences for students and their teachers. Our Promo Science project is entitled Helping Teachers Integrate Environmental Science and Indigenous Traditional Knowledge in a Rapidly Changing World. A mouthful of a title, I realize. The project aims to incorporate Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee teachings and insights into grades 9 and 10 high school curricula. Working with scientists, teachers, education faculty, and Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders, we're developing land-based lesson plans focused on the myriad environmental challenges facing humanity today, including climate change and species extinctions. And now it is my pleasure to provide a brief biography, a very brief biography of Dr. Littlebear, given his huge range of accomplishments. As Liv said, Dr. Littlebear is a renowned educator and academic researcher who has focused on the advancement and acceptance of Indigenous American philosophy and ways of knowing in education, and has worked tirelessly to facilitate access to education for all Indigenous peoples globally. Dr. Littlebear grew up on the Blood Reserve in southern Alberta and has deep roots to this part of the world. He completed a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Lethbridge in 1972 and received a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Utah in 1975. That's a degree in law. He founded the Native American Studies Department at the University of Lethbridge, his alma mater, and this was Canada's first university-based Native American Studies program. And he was its chair for 21 years. That seems like a very long time. From January 1998 to June 1999, he was director of the Harvard University Native American program. Dr. Littlebear, as many of you probably are aware, has written extensively, including co-authoring 3 texts, Pathways to Self-Determination, Native Indian Leaders' Perspectives on Self-Government, Quest for Justice, Aboriginal Rights in Canada, and Governments in Conflict, Provinces and Indian Nations in Canada. He helped to write Justice on Trial, a report for Alberta's Task Force on the Criminal Justice System and its impacts on Indian and Métis people of Alberta. Dr. Littlebear also contributed to publications for the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, on criminal justice issues, and for the Assembly of First Nations on constitutional issues. He has provided legal insights to numerous Indigenous organizations on land claims, treaties, and hunting and fishing rights. Just to give you one indication of how influential Dr. Littlebear is, his work led to a United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In 2003, Dr. Littlebear received the National Aboriginal Achievement Award for Education, the highest honor bestowed by Canada's First Nations community. He is an officer of the Order of Canada, is recipient of the Alberta Order of Excellence, and has received honorary doctorates from his alma mater, the University of Lethbridge, and from the University of Northern British Columbia. It is indeed a very great a gift to have Dr. Littlebear with us today, and we are most grateful for his time. His talk today is entitled Rethinking Our Science, Blackfoot Metaphysics Waiting in the Wings, Reflections by a Blackfoot. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Littlebear.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that wonderful introduction. Niston nakok, ikas kiniwa, I naksix kanao. So kitapio, yanay nukhtu tsitapi. I was introducing myself in Blackfoot. I'm of the Small Ropes band or clan. I belong to Ghana, known as the Blood Tribe, and we belong to the Blackfoot Confederacy, you know. I'm very honored to be invited to share thoughts with you today. And as I always give a warning to my audiences, I come here to play around with your minds, and I can say anything, just like the royal opposition in government. I can say anything because the royal opposition are not responsible for making any decisions. So they can say anything. Well, I can say anything. And if you have any questions, then someone ask Alice or Stephen or, you know, your teachers and so on. And I know my good friend Brent is in the audience. Go ask him and so on. But I, thought I would share some of these thoughts that we're going to present with you today. So I'm not the most tech person in the world, but let's see if we can get on the screen these the presentation and the ideas we want to share with you. What I want to talk to you about is very basic stuff that most of us really don't think about on a daily basis. Every morning, just like you did this morning, if you can go back just to getting up this morning, most of us simply get up and we do. But we never question the foundational basis upon what we do is based. Because subconsciously, we simply accept that this is the way it is. See, it always reminds me of some of you that are old enough like me about Paul Harvey, the new kind of newscaster. He used to say, I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. And he'd also, who was it that on CBS, he used to always end his newscast with, this is the way it is. Well, every once in a while, something may come along to make us question deeply held foundations, like a midlife crisis. And I've been talking about a midlife crisis as of late. When somebody does have a midlife crisis, and we all know people who have gone through midlife crisis, that they ask themselves, really profound questions. Way back when we were going through and rethinking the Constitution for Canada, that was kind of a midlife crisis for Canada. When, TRC came about, that was kind of like a midlife crisis. And now COVID-19 is giving us an opportunity to also go through a midlife crisis. And it is a good thing to go through the exercise of a midlife crisis periodically. Why? Well, because most of us, when we ask, when we go through a midlife crisis or somebody is going through a midlife crisis, they ask, as we've said, profound, loaded questions, such as, who am I? What the hell am I doing this for? What is life all about? And so on. And somebody might say, I've been on this job for 30 years. And I hate the damn thing, but I've got kids to send to school. I've got a house to pay for. In other words, they're saying, I'm stuck in it. And somebody else might say, I'm going to sell everything I've got. And I'm going to go around the world. In other words, they're saying, I want to do something different. And there might be a person that'll say, hey, I like what I'm doing. I think I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. See? So, something like COVID-19, it is one of the most elementary forms of life, manifesting itself in a molecular form, is causing global disorder. It presents a first-hand look at how fragile our so-called normal really is. But I don't want to spend too much time on COVID-19. What I do want to talk to you about is for us to take the opportunity that COVID-19 presents to us to stop and reflect. What are the metaphysics of our sciences? And where are those metaphysics taking us? Do we ever stop and think about that? Did we stop and think about that when we got up this morning? But what do we mean by metaphysics? Well, metaphysics are the foundational basis of our thinking processes. They are the criteria we use on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis, and are so embodied in us that they go unquestioned, unstated, and taken for granted, but form the basis of our beliefs, what we do, and how we relate. See, when we talk about metaphysics, let me give you an example of that. See, all societies at one time or another lay claim to a territory. However, that society may come into existence. You might ask John Locke or Rousseau or some other social scientist or philosopher. And within that territory, a culture arises from the mutual relationship with the land and the totality of the environment. A culture consists of paradigmatic concepts, values, and customs. Paradigms or metaphysics are the tacit infrastructures members of the society use for their beliefs, behaviors, and relationships. Now, the metaphysics of our modern Western world, see, are based, see, do we ever think about this? The metaphysics of our modern Western world, which is the dominant metaphysics in today's world, are based on a stagnant world. In other words, we see the world as being stagnant, best exemplified by my drinking partner from way back, Einstein. He's one of my favorite scientists. When he said, God does not play dice with the universe. In other words, this is the way he made it, and they'll always be this way. Everything is about matter in the Western thought. Everything is inanimate, except for a few sentient beings like you and me, and those birds out there, and so on. We look at things in isolation. In other words, we might start out from a broad perspective, but we eventually come down to the point, and that's why we're always looking for one right way, one right answer. See? We are future oriented. In other words, we're always looking upstream. And the best way to look at that is, kind of in a pejorative sense, been there, done, did it. Let's move on, see. And this has lots of implications for education. Because if I'm in grade 7 and I ask a grade 3 question, what will the teacher tell me? The teacher will say, you should have known that in grade 3. Get with the program. Say, even in university. Hey, that's why we have intro classes. You should know that in your first year. Say, all of that is captured in the language we speak. A Euro language like English, a noun-based language, which is very binary in nature. Lastly, our main reference in the back of our minds all the time is the notion of time, when there is no such thing. But we use time. Time is always there. These metaphysics, see, when we start to think about these metaphysics, they give birth to social values such as bigger, newer, faster, higher, more, and so on. You see the picture. See, those are the social values of Western society. These in turn are based on the thinking of the Enlightenment era, or Age of Reason, as I prefer to call it. See, they came out of the Enlightenment era. Now, when you stop and kind of examine these notions, these foundational bases that we wake up with every morning, paradigms and metaphysics are the foundational basis of a society's way of thinking, beliefs, behavior, customs, and values. A quantum physicist, Nobel Prize winner, Steven Weinberg, talking about objectivity. You know, all scientists like to be objective. If there is such a thing as objectivity, says objectivity should be something that doesn't refer in any specific way to human beings. It should be something from which everything else, including anything you can say systematically about chemistry or biology or human affairs, can be derived. It shouldn't have human beings at the beginning in the laws of nature. And yet, I don't see any way of formulating the quantum mechanics without an interpretive postulate that refers to what happens when people choose to measure one thing or another thing. In other words, objectivity, is out there. But as soon as a human being comes into the picture, it becomes an interpretation. In other words, those metaphysics, those paradigms that I've been referring to are our interpretive templates about that objective world. See? So all they are is interpretive templates. And yet, we fight wars over them. Your paradigms or metaphysics are your interpretive template. And that is all they are, interpretive tools. That interpretive template becomes the foundation of your science and science methodology. Blackfoot science, for instance, has a different interpretive template and therefore a different approach to science. We'll say a little bit more on that. Now, coming back to the Age of Reason, the Age of Reason came into existence during the 16th century in Europe. It was a paradigmatic, ideological, and philosophical movement. It was about rationalism, a belief that you can come to know and arrive at truth strictly through reason, as opposed to faith, reliance on the past, intuition, and metaphysics. It gave rise to deism. In other words, we can come to know things through our gift of reason from God. God made an orderly universe, and it is good and beautiful. God does not play dice with the universe. See? In other words, that kind of revolution was brought about because it was a counter movement to the old establishment of the divine rule of kings and reliance on tradition. It attempted to subject anything and everything to rationalism. It was kind of like, the kings and the queens, the monarchs and the church were the educated. They were the writers. They knew how to write and read and so on. They wrote the history books and so on. They had the libraries. The commoners didn't have access to those. And there came a time when the commoners said, hell with those libraries over there. We don't need them. We can come to know things just through pure reason. See, it's like today's students saying, I don't have to go to the library. I can ask Siri. Siri will tell me what it's all about. See, it did away with the subjective and dealt with only the objective. It did away with emotions and feelings. So that, for instance, women were too emotional to be scientists and leaders. Separation of church and state came into being. As a result, mysticism and miracles, ghosts, and the like were frowned upon. Measurement, and hence the role of mathematics, became the foundation of the scientific method. In other words, if it can't be measured, it's not scientific. And that's the reason why today, anything, just think about COVID-19. All they talk about is numbers. You and I, when we go to the doctor, all we are is numbers. Temperature, this and so forth, everything is just about numbers. Simply put, experimentation and pure reason can bring about knowledge. For those of you that are quantum physicists and know a little bit about subatomic, physics, for instance, a few years ago, the Higgs particle, the scientists were saying, through our reasoning, meaning our formula, the Higgs particle should be occupying this space, and its weight should be this. In Western science, in other words, everything is propositional. Everything is propositional. We're like prophets. There is no room for anything that cannot be measured, nor is there any room for subjectivity. And in this subjectivity, we're including things like intuition, feelings, and so on, love, and so on, relationships. Those can't be measured, therefore, not scientific. Scholars, such as Ian McGilchrist, for instance, suggest that we have become largely left-brain thinkers. Our thinking is about control and manipulation, abstraction, anonymity, organizability, predictability, in other words, the propositional notion, and of course, financial balance sheets. In the process, justice gets interpreted simply as equality. And in the economy, it gets interpreted as efficiency. The left brain does not understand things, but simply processes them. The right brain is the basis of understanding. The left brain prefers the explicit. The explicit not knowing that making things explicit is like explaining a joke. You see the point. It's like two magnets, one saying to the other, I really find you attractive. Our approach to knowledge is largely declaratory and propositional and not experiential. Now, we are not denying the benefits and advances brought about by our present left brain metaphysics, but most of that is materiality. Is our present metaphysics improving and advancing our species? Are we happier, healthier, safer? McGilchrist tells of a teacher who was having to teach students how to read facial expressions because of smartphones. A teacher was having to teach students how to read facial expressions. That's a sad statement about the impact of technology on humans. So, are we becoming increasingly robotized? So, being in a university, I ask, is that what we want to turn out of our universities? Von Goethe, back in the early 1700s and early 1800s, did try to include the notion of spirit and so on into the science, but he was quickly pushed aside. Then in the early 1900s, quantum physics came on the scene. It was about uncertainty, particle wave duality, non-locality, constant motion, probability, which were all part of native thought, indigenous thinking, spirituality. David Bohm, famous physicist, he challenged some of these major scientific assumptions. See? So it seems that we need to rethink our science. COVID-19 making us stay at home is giving us an opportunity to do that. Now, the age of reason was in full bloom at the time of colonization of North American Indians, because native science was about wholeness, spirituality, waves as opposed to particles, everything being about relationships, everything being animate. It was totally discounted by the rationalists because it was not about measurement and mathematics. It was nothing but mythology. It was not taken seriously. So let's take another look. The following pictures, except for the buffalo that I will show, are pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. This is how it looks from the Hubble Space Telescope out in space. These are all energy waves in constant flux. Everything is in constant motion. They're not about particles or matter. Everything is about energy waves in a native thought. And in fact, those energy waves are the spirit. That's why native people are always talking about the spirit. Anishinaabe, Mi'kmaq, Blackfoot, Cree, you name our people, we're always about spirit. It's those energy waves. They are the spirit. Everything is animate. This buffalo, all the plants, the stars. In other words, the totality of existence is animate. And they are all have their own spirit. That, there's nothing in Blackfoot thought, for instance, that's inanimate. Everything is animate. Everything is interrelated. That's why we talk about all my relations. When we're talking about all my relations, hey, I'm not talking about my human relations, my biological relations. I'm talking about those bears, that grass, those flowers, those trees, those rocks, those stars up there. They're all my relations. And we have to keep an bio balance with all of them. See? Renewal. See? We have to renew those relationships all the time. See, you and I live in a very narrow gap of ideal conditions for humans to exist. We live in a very narrow gap of ideal conditions. If you fool around with, change any of those ideal conditions, add to them or take away from them, Homo sapiens won't be around very long. If you don't believe that, stop breathing for 20 minutes and see how long you last. See. We're place, space thinkers. Why? Well, because land, even though it's part of the flux and we know it's going to change, but at least it doesn't change as fast as other things. So at least for the time being, we can hang our hat on it. See? So we can use it as a reference point. That's why land, place is very, very important to indigenous people. See? Language is very important because it's the repository for all the knowledge that we take in from all this relational network that we have, from those metaphysics. When we bring them all together, language is the repository for them. So language is, because it's always in motion, our language is very process oriented. I don't like to say, and I stay away from saying that Blackfoot is verb oriented, because even the word verb is a noun. We're not noun oriented. People say, people don't believe it, that I can speak all day without saying a noun. Now, I put this over here as one of these things that talking about what we wake up to. See, in Western society, you will recall God does not play dice with the universe. There's a belief that there's an underlying order, and that if there's any chaos, the chaos is caused by humans and maybe a few other things and so on. But there is an underlying order. See? Whereas in native thought, there's an underlying chaos because of the flux and so on. And what we're trying to do through our culture is bring about some order. So our culture is really an ordering process. So it's really order over chaos. In Western thought, it's chaos over order, a very different way of thinking. And I won't go into all of these. I'll just put them up there for a deal, but you could see some similarities, some differences between quantum physics and native science and so on. You know, you can see some similarities, some differences, some overlap. Yeah, that's why our elders can have good conversations with quantum physicists. So the thing is, the question to be asked is, where is Western metaphysics taking us? Because it is the dominant metaphysics in today's world. Well, we as Homo sapiens, are we better off as a result of it? Is it really advancing the reason for our existence? If we ever stop and think about it, is our current metaphysics just a passing phase? In other words, I jokingly tell people, I used to text Neanderthal because at one time he was my neighbor. But where is he now? He's gone. Are we next? You know that there are scientists today that are already talking about the next species that are going to succeed us. So are we just a passing phase? Do we ever think about that when we wake up in the morning? Maybe there are other metaphysics that we should take a good look at. See, Western science is largely aimed at exploration. Native science is aimed at sustainability. In other words, hey, let's see if we can maintain those systems that make for our continuing existence. As we've said, we exist in a very narrow gap of ideal conditions. We need to maintain those conditions if we are to be around as long as the fish has. You know that the fish existed before the dinosaurs were around. But have we ever asked the fish what his secret is? No. We keep putting up dams. So, hey, that fish may not be around either in a little while. See. Western science is largely based on measurement. And as we said earlier, anything that cannot be measured is not scientific. Blackfoot science, for instance, is largely based on relationships. It is all about my relations. So much so, if it is not about relationships, it is not science. I have used Blackfoot Metaphysics to compare to Western metaphysics. Why? Well, because to a large extent, a few hundred years ago, and they're struggling, the church was supposed to tell us what it was all about. But they haven't been able to do that. Then we turn to the scientists. As Gary Zukav, in his book, Dancing Woolly Masters, says, now we've turned to the scientists to tell us what it's all about. Well, after 300-400 years now, they're coming back and they're saying, we think the answer is in you. So that's why I blame our schools for the products that we turn out as students. Our universities and colleges are the present gatekeepers of knowledge, just like the church and monarchs used to be. But could it be that our gatekeeping methodology is out of date? Just like if you go to a Mac store, Apple store, you walk in there with your phone, they'll tell you that's old, get an iPhone 12. Even though your phone is working perfectly? Could it be that our gatekeeping methodology and our metaphysics are a little bit out of date? Could it be that our left brain metaphysics are increasingly leading us down a pathway of short-term gratification through materialism? Let's stop and reflect. Blackfoot Metaphysics is waiting in the wings. Reconciliation with nature will go a long ways towards rethinking our science. We have to rethink our present approach of torturing nature to reveal its secrets. Remember Francis Bacon? We have to torch nature to reveal its secrets. COVID-19 is giving us an opportunity to reflect about the normal, because the normal is the problem. That normal is based on metaphysics we never question. We just take for granted that that is the way it is, when in reality, that normal is just an interpretive template. Western science is all about measurement. Native science is all about relationships. Our challenge is to reconcile those two fundamental approaches to science so that we can open new science doors. Those are the thoughts I wanted to share with you today. And the thing is, just as an example, about the COVID-19. People are blaming bats that's where COVID-19 originated from them. Well, think about it this way. See, those bats feed on a lot of insects, worms, and things like that. But because of the expansion of agriculture into their territory, into the bats' territory, we spread pesticides on lands now so that those crops will grow without all those insects and so on. Now the bats have nothing to feed on, so they have to travel much further to get their food. And in that long distance travel to get their food, they come into contact with people or other animals, like livestock, that they normally wouldn't come in contact with had we not invaded their territory. See? And therefore, when they come into contact with us, viruses that they carry start to spread amongst us that we have no immunity to. See? That's the kind of thing we don't normally think about in the morning when we get up. And it's all about that relational network that I've been referring to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leroy, for that wonderful talk. We're all just so lucky to be able to hear you speak about something you're so passionate about and so knowledgeable about. And I just feel really honored to be here and really humbled to have heard your words. So thank you so much. We do have a few questions that have come in from the audience as you've been speaking. So I'll do my best to communicate those to you. And then perhaps if we have time at the end, I have a few questions for you as well.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so Bert Horwood is wondering, how can Western people today establish the fundamental relationships with the land they inhabit when the land is so severely damaged?
Well, my the thing that I'm asking and what I'm trying to get people to do is to say, let's stop and reflect. Just like a person going through a midlife crisis, see. And it's in that process of reflection that we say, hey, maybe the approach that I've been using, that I've been utilizing, those processes and things like that, maybe I have to do something different. See? So it's really a mindset. See? And so we have certain beliefs because our belief system in Western thought has been pretty well based on the biblical belief that everything was made by God for the benefit of man. See? And coupled with the notion that everything is inanimate. So I can do anything to the environment. I can do anything to those other animals and so on. See, whereas in Anishinaabe thought, in Mi'kmaq thought, in Iroquoian thought, hey, those are my relations. They have just as much right as I do, see? And therefore, I have to build a relationship with them, see? A very different approach, see? So it's that mindset that we have to really, rethink, through and through,
Wonderful. Thank you for that rich answer. Leah Islamo is wondering, you have spoken at length about the differences between Western and Indigenous metaphysics and science. In our contemporary world, I see both as having value. Can you speak to the ways in which you see these coming into relation with each other? And how can we integrate this new relationship in our own lives?
Well, the thing is, most people, this is where the notion of language really comes into the picture. Language really colonizes us, how we think. See, and most people think usually in English, it's always either or, because we think in black and white, saint and sinner, day and night. And there's a watertight boundary between those notions, see? And, so most people think about, hey, measurement and relationships, because Western science is based on measurement. Native science is based on relationship. And so how do we bring the two together? See, it's because they're thinking about them as either or. See, well, the thing is, it's our thought again. The language we think in is bringing us down that dichotomous notion. See, and a lot of people are struggling with these ideas. See, so people are writing about, for instance, some of the latest articles are two-eyed seeing, for instance, is an article that just came out not too long ago about how you can bring those two together and that. So really, I refer to David Bohm. Well, David Bohm was talking about how we can make the English language a little bit more process-oriented when he was talking about a real mode for the English language. So if you can begin to examine what the language does to you, okay? I'm not saying do away with it, but realize what it does to you, see? And work around those, work around those. Because once you realize, you'll find out, hey, English is good for this, Blackfoot or Anishinaabe, Iroquois, Mohawk, for instance, is good for this. Hey, then you'll find where you could have good relationships and so on. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sophie Pheasant is really interested in the education system and is wondering what needs to change, and saying that she feels the pedagogy just seems so outdated. And I think you touched on that a little bit in terms of perhaps bringing language in, but is there anything else that you think fundamentally needs to shift in our schools?
Very good question. I think about pedagogy as the art, underline, underscore art of teaching. Now, most of our schools, most of our universities are still turning out teachers as though they are going to be as though they are going to be teaching in a unicultural classroom. See, as though they're going to teach in a unicultural classroom. Well, you look around the country, you look around your city and so on, will you find a unicultural classroom? I don't think so. See? So, a good teacher has to know its student audience, the different cultures that the students are from, and be appreciative of the different cultures that the students come from, so that the teacher doesn't have to be an expert in all of those cultures, but have a good at least some understanding of those cultures, so that the teacher can better relate to those students. Because a good teacher knows how to relate to students. See? And so if you can relate to those students, you'll be much more effective. Most of the time, let's say like for the indigenous students and so on, hey, they say, geez, yeah, interesting, but has nothing to do with my life and so on. Learning about Hamlet and so on. Interesting, but has nothing to do with me, See, so it's knowing a little bit about the culture of each of the student audience. Yeah.
Wonderful. Candace Christmas writes, colonization followed by economic globalization and immigration took us away from being place-based. It took us away from our relations, where through the market we purchase our ecosystems, such as childcare, medicine, food. COVID showed us how this is completely unsustainable, and our relations are far from us. We cannot see them. Our village, which we cannot purchase, falls apart. Families are under so much pressure. Do you think that place space is the foundation to go back to what we have lost? Shared land and relations. In other words, what is the first step to finding what we have lost through positive metaphysics?
Well, place-based, land-based, hey, that's where the relationships grow. That's where we start from. And hey, all those things, the food sources coming from thousands of miles away and so on, are the factory lineups. And we refer to them as efficiency. Very efficient, okay? But in the process, there's no relationship to all the processes and so on, see? And because I just go and purchase them, I have nothing, it has nothing to do with my neighbor over here. We never cooperated in working together and so on. So, hey, food sovereignty that people are talking about nowadays is all about, working together at the local level, and it's where relationships are developed and so on. And it's not so much the food anymore. The wealth really is in the actual relationship with the people, your neighbors, and the land, and so on. You know, that's what food sovereignty is about. Yeah.
Wonderful. The next question comes from Barbara Wall, and I'll probably combine two questions here. She's wondering how teachers and university professors introduce this relational paradigm to students who are so immersed in a Western paradigm. And there was another question asking what you would say to people who are so conditioned to see Western science as the only legitimate form of science, or a way of making sense of the natural world, that they're really resistant to seeing spiritual ways of knowing and being as having any form of legitimacy because they can't be weighed, seen, observed, measured, etc. What would you say to those people?
Well, as we've said, metaphysics, the metaphysical basis, are really your interpretive tool. Those metaphysical bases, we've outlined them, and they are your interpretive tool for anything that comes to you as a person. Okay. And that's how you interpret things, that it's no different than, to a large extent, as a computer. Whether what you put into that computer, hey, into another computer, a Mac to a PC, hey, into a PC, it's just mumbo jumbo, and vice versa. See? And so, hey, it may make lots of sense in the Mac, but in a PC, hey, it's just mumbo jumbo. So you need an interpretational app to make sense. So now the thing is, we, we think that this interpretation is it, okay, is it. But if we can realize, again, what those metaphysics do to us, we find out that all it is it's an interpretation. That's all it is. It's an interpretation. And like you hinted at, we fight wars over that interpretation. That's what wars are all about. Thinking my interpretation is the interpretation. See, now alongside of it is the difference between science and technology. Okay, most people kind of mix up and think the two are the same. Science is about stretching the envelope about what we know. Okay, so we're always stretching the envelope, trying to uncover the unknown. Okay, technology is application of the known. So today, all our science toys, including our iPhones, computers, and so on, that was known almost 100 years ago. The science behind it was known almost 100 years ago. See, in other words, technology is just now catching up. See,
Right.
But new science, we're not making very much progress. Scientists maybe they're trying, but we're not making much new progress. There is, you know, people might say, well, hey, we're going to Mars and we're going to the moon and all that. Well, there is 3 large areas of science. There's the science of the big, which is astrophysics, the science of the small, which is quantum physics, and the science of the local, which is the reality that you and I are in on a daily basis. That's the one you and I are in. It's the science of the local. Okay. The rules of the science of the local do not apply in the science of the big, nor in the science of the small. They don't apply. And if you want to think about it a little bit, every once in a while, maybe sometimes nightly, you might enter one of those worlds. But dreams, when you think about dreams, you enter that other world, and the physical aspects don't apply in the, just the physical world, just the science of the rules of the science of the local just don't apply in dreams. See, to get some idea.
Right.
And so when we're trying to go to Mars, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the science of the local and we're trying to transport it into Mars. Well, the question is, will the science of the local apply in Mars? See, well, it's minus 81 in Mars. Over there, will we survive?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that rich answer to all of our questions. And I hate to say it, but we are at the end of our time with you, which is such a shame. But I just wanted to thank everyone so much for being here. I'd like to thank you again, Leroy, for delivering such a rich lecture and helping us to further our understanding through this question and answer period. I also wanted to let you know that the talk will be available on the Queen's University Biological Station YouTube channel. We'll also be sending it out to you, so you'll get a chance to review that again. We would really appreciate it if you could provide us with feedback on how today's session went. So we will send you a link to a survey for that purpose, and you could also use your phone to scan this QR code right now if you have the time. Again, we'd like to acknowledge how grateful we are to Leroy for being here and to the Indigenous Teacher Education Program for supporting this wonderful event. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leroy.